Okay. Hello, Mr. Ben. We are honored by your present. And السلام عليكم. أهلا بالجميع. يا هلا والله وسهلا ومرحبا. احنا سعيدين اليوم بالصحفي الكبير، باستضافة الصحفي الكبير بن جيكوب. Welcome, Mr. Ben.
Thank you for having me. Hello, everybody.
Thank you. There is my friend here, Hazza. He will help me with translate and everything. We can ask question about something will be happen in the Saudi Pro League. So first of all, what do you think about the future of the Saudi Pro League and the Middle East here for the football?
I think it's very exciting times. It's the early stage of a very ambitious project, and we've only seen one big summer of spending so far. But what we have to remember is that those running the league are planning between now and 2030, and also between now and the 2034 World Cup. So we can't really judge the Pro League now, not in terms of comparing it to some of the top leagues in the world, but what those who are running the Pro League are looking for is improvement over time. They also want to bring through younger Saudi players. And in addition to that, they want to try and target a global audience as well as one in Saudi Arabia. So I think we've already seen improvement. And I think that now the spending and the ambition need to be caught up with by the infrastructure. And by that, I mean over time, the star names will require better stadiums, bigger attendances, stronger facilities, more sports science. And all of this is within the Saudi plan, but it's not going to happen overnight. So this is just the beginning.
طيب ثانك يو بن جاكوب. بس عشان حبيبنا أول شيء مسي عليك وعلى also we are welcoming Mr. Ben Jacob and everybody here. بس عشان ترجم، بس عشان بشكل سريع، بس عشان ما نتأخر. طبعا هو يتكلم عن الانفاق. يعني نعم، مشروع رياضي كبير والنجوم قادمة لا محال للدوري السعودي. مشروع يستهدف من هنا لين 2030 استقطاب النجوم العالميين. أيضا السعودية يعني كان عندها أعلى وأضخم ميركاتو على مدى التاريخ، اللي هو ميركاتو الصيفي الماضي، اللي حصل فيه أسماء ونجوم عالميين جاوا للدوري السعودي. هذه فقط بداية، القادم بيكون أكثر بالنسبة للدوري السعودي إن شاء الله. بس عشان نمشي بس خطوة خطوة، عشان بس ما نطول، لأن أنا أعتقد الوقت محدود يا عزيز. صحيح؟
صحيح أبو عزوز، أبو صالح. خلاص، وش رايك نتبع نظرية إن نخليه يتكلم كل اللي عنده، لأنه هو قال لي 5:30 يبغى يمشي، يعني بعد 20 دقيقة تقريبا، فبتوقيت يوكي يعني يساوي عندنا 8:30، فعندنا تقريبا 18 دقيقة
على
الآن.
السريع، وكل ما قال شيء سريع ترجمه سريع، بناخذ وقت يعني، بس عشان خطوة
ما
ستيب باي ستيب.
أنا مسجل المساحة أبو صالح عشان برضو يعني نرجع لها، وفيه في ترجمة ما بعد يعني ما ينصرف يعني أو لأن تعرف الأجانب شوي مشغولين. عموما راح نسأل أسئلة سريعة في 18 دقيقة هذه على السريع عشان ما نأخر الضيف. Another question, Mr. Bean, what do you think about we heard rumors about Bruno Fernandes yesterday. There is any chance to come to Al Hilal?
I think it's difficult with Bruno Fernandes. I think there will be other Manchester United players that are more gettable in the summer. There's still no indication that Bruno Fernandes will leave Manchester United. He's the captain at the moment. I'm told that the possibility is 2025, not 2024 for Bruno Fernandes, whereas Casemiro, Rafa Varane, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, three players that could potentially move to Saudi Arabia this summer. I think Casemiro and Al Hilal has been looked at. Wan-Bissaka was Al Nassr, and with Varane, the club hasn't been decided yet because there's more than one.
Can you just wait a minute? بس أو تكلم بس على السريع. كاسيميرو، تكلم عن كاسيميرو والهلال. برونو فرنانديز أيضا في احتمالية أكثر من لاعب. أيضا آرون بيساكا للنصر، الظهير أيمن طبعا آرون بيساكا. What else? You just mentioned Bruno Fernandes, the other one, Casemiro, the last one, Aaron Bissaka. I think
Wan-Bissaka,
right back, right?
Wan-Bissaka Al Nassr, they made a offer for him in January, but Manchester United and the player were not really interested. But the summer could be a different story. And Varane, there's lots of Saudi clubs that think that that might be possible in the summer. I think that Al Ittihad and Al Nassr are the two that have looked to date, but I wouldn't rule out Al Shabab or even Al Qadsiya if they get promoted from the second division.
Okay, sounds good. Another question, Mr. Jacob. There is rumors about how about Jesus, George Jesus? There is any chance will he renew his contract, or there is any information about that for next year?
Yeah, I think Al Hilal are happy, although let's not forget in the summer before he joined, they had approached Jose Mourinho with a big offer, and he is now a free agent. But I think that at the moment, there's nothing more that Jesus can do to stay because the team are top and by a relatively healthy distance, and they're still also in the Asian Champions League as well. So Al Hilal are not at the moment anyway considering making a managerial change.
Okay. I have one question also, Mr. Bin. There is any coaches will be coming to Saudi Pro League in the next summer, or there any star names? I mean, big coaches in the Europe will be coming here.
Yeah, I think that the Saudi deal makers are always on the lookout for big names. We know that Jose Mourinho has said he will manage in Saudi Arabia one day. Whether or not that's this summer remains to be seen. It was never close between Mourinho and Al Shabab, despite reports. There was no agreement, there was nothing advanced. But it's easier for a big name manager to move to Saudi Arabia in the summer rather than in the middle of the season. So I think there's a few names to keep an eye on. I'm not told that Jurgen Klopp is a target or somebody who is likely to come to Saudi Arabia. I know we hear some rumours about him leaving Liverpool and potentially coming to Saudi, but I'm told Klopp wants a year break from football and then may consider international management as well. The Germany job may be available for the 2026 World Cup. So he's the kind of name that between now and 2030, perhaps those in Saudi Arabia will target, but there's nothing likely or imminent this year. The other name that I hear is on the list in the long term to watch out for maybe in the next season or two is Marcelo Bielsa, who is a manager that Saudi Arabia would also love to bring. Nothing is advanced or likely at this stage. And the reason why I keep saying nothing is that likely is because a lot of the bigger clubs in Saudi Arabia at the moment have recently appointed a manager. So those clubs will not want too much change. But I think Al Shabab will still be looking for a big name manager if they can get one either now or certainly by the summer.
Hello, Ben. Can I call you Ben? That can be
Yeah,
problem.
of course. Please do.
Thank you very much. My name is Dries. So I'm from France, just near of you. So that I'm keeping. My question, I'm just changing all the subject. My question is, it's the same things in France that all people in England can. How about opinion of people in England about this development about Saudi Arabia, about Russian football teams? How people. All people. I know media, Sky News. I know all the time that he afraid about this development, about all investment going to Arabia Saudi. But people in England, what's the opinion about this development in this country about football?
Well, it's
Is
a good question.
clear or
Most
not?
people at the moment are really just watching highlights or seeing goals on social media. And the challenge is perhaps to have a bigger and more consistent global audience that are watching the games live or longer than just a social media clip. And nobody really in England at the moment, not Premier League fans anyway, feels like the Saudi Pro League is a threat in terms of standard, but maybe one or two fans feel like their star names might be tempted by the money. So there's maybe some concern. If you look, for example, to come back to Al Hilal at Mitrovic, Fulham were not happy that he wanted to leave. And in the end, that was down to higher wages being offered. But now I think the clubs realize it works both ways. And it's not
But
only a case of...
the medias, they are afraid about that.
No, I don't think the media are afraid about it. I think it creates headlines and stories and it becomes a bit sensationalized. But I think everybody accepts that not every player at this stage in the league is going to want to move to Saudi Arabia. So if things progress slowly and patiently, because remember, those running the league are not trying to do it all in one window. They have a strategy between now and 2030. So I think maybe some of the, if you want to call it fear, is that this is only going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So maybe now the Saudi League isn't equivalent to the Premier League, and many players, younger ones, will want to stay in England. I think the media are well aware that by the time we get to 2030 or the 2034 World Cup, the Saudi Pro League may be a lot stronger. And at that point, it may be one of the top 10 or top 5 leagues in the world. So now maybe the media are sensationalizing, dramatizing stories a little bit, and everything becomes a kind of saga. The chase for Mo Salah that didn't happen, Jordan Henderson leaving. It's very specific around certain names because the media know that there's interest around Salah, there's interest around Henderson, but maybe not so much, say, Gabri Vega. Whereas I feel like in the next 3 or 4 seasons, that may change. And if the Saudi Pro League can get its stars younger and at their peak and to stay for longer as well, then at that point, the league will become more of a serious threat. And then I think that it will have more media coverage and the manner in which it's covered will be different to how it is now.
I understand that. I understand that. The same thing that we have in France about the Saudi Premier League, about all this development, about all this investment, and they are afraid in France. You know that it's not the same thinking about England or about France. France, they think European football, the management all the time. That you know that you live there and you know how about or Occidental people when they think that there is something new in Middle East or something like that, they push in them. But my other question or my second question for you, Ben, it's how can Saudi Pro League can get this amazing or this good experience about Premier League? How can get it? Because we know all the people know that the league, the Premier League, it's the best league in the world. About television, about all the thing. But how this experiments can be translated in Arabia Saudi for being a good or something like that, a good football league.
Yeah, I think the first thing is it just takes time. The Premier League started in the early 90s. It was probably only around 2000 that the product really started to develop. So this isn't something you can buy overnight. The thing is that in football, you can take a star or even 100 stars if you've got the money and the ambition, but you can't build every team to be competitive overnight. You can't build 15 or 20 new stadiums. You can't get those stadiums to have thousands and thousands more fans overnight. You can't get tourists to come and watch games. You can't get big television partners to air the matches on their main channels all overnight. It takes time. So the way that the Saudi Pro League can get closer to the Premier League is by being patient, by starting with these stars like Benzema and Ronaldo, and then slowly improving its grassroots at the same time. So the young Saudi players, the young players from the Middle East and North Africa, they are all getting better. Because when you raise the standard, you don't just raise the standard based on Benzema, you raise the standard because you have good coaching, good development, and then all of your local players also improve. And then over time, more people want to watch. And I think that when you get to that point, you have the ability to bring in more commercial partners. And at the same time, you have to innovate. You have to make sure that you're using the best cameras, you're playing into new trends. The modern football fan is young. Saudi Arabia's population is young. People often like to watch the game and do something else. They like to have a football match on and be on social media. They like to have a football match on and go for coffee. They maybe are watching actively sometimes, but other times it's more passive because they're doing something else with their friends. So when you are ambitious and developing, you have more freedom than the Premier League. So Saudi Arabia can try things, it can innovate, it can do things differently. And that might result in targeting a new audience that likes the experience because it's got different presentation, different cameras, different digital output. And all of these things help as well. But the biggest thing that the Saudi Pro League has to do, despite the headlines, despite the money, despite the spending, despite the World Cup, the biggest thing the Saudi Pro League has to do is be patient. Because if it departs from its strategy, which is nearly a decade, then it won't work. If it cuts corners, if it rushes things, then it's going to take a step forwards and two steps backwards. So we need to judge the league after 5 years or 10 years, not now, even though it's off to a very exciting start.
Thank you very much Ben. Thank you very much. تفضل يا أخي عبد العزيز ولا بندر. تفضلوا.
Vince, thank you. It's the second time I see you in a week. I'm lucky to be with you here.
Yeah, it's good to see you.
Look,
or hear you anyway.
I will take you back to Salah's story. After your clarification in my space last time, and you said your answer was very clear. There was only one offer, which is a verbal offer, 150 million pounds. It was rejected at the same time, and the deal never been on. The other side of the story from us, I don't know if you can confirm it or not. The deal was on till the last day. The recruiting team were already in London with the CEO of Al Ittihad Club, waiting for the final approval. Only funding the budget of the deal results that the deal never happened. Can you confirm something like this, or you will stand with your say that's rejected since the beginning? What do you think?
Well, it wasn't rejected since the beginning. The point is the offer verbally to Mike Gordon came late in the window. So there were two periods. There was the close of the European window, and then about a week later, there was the close of the Saudi window. So what I'm saying is, in the final few days of the European window, the deal was still on. And as you say, there were a number of senior figures that were over in London. And London is significant because that's where Liverpool do a lot of their business. Not everything is up in Liverpool. Their commercial offices, their recruitment offices are all in London. And the delegation were waiting to see what was possible. But there was only one offer. And that was made at the end of the European window. And it was for a total package, including bonuses, of 150 million English pounds. And Mike Gordon said no. And then the deal makers felt like pushing further, formally anyway, might damage their relationship with Liverpool, knowing that they may need to come back, that they will come back and place another offer. So no second offer was made. But this wasn't earlier in the window. This was right at the end of the window. And then when the European window closed, yes, it's true, the Saudi window was still open for a week. But at that point, the deal makers knew that they wouldn't get any success because Liverpool obviously had no time or ability because their window was shut to replace Salah. So I stand by my reporting that there was only ever one verbal and official offer for Mo Salah. And as soon as that was rejected, it was the end of the chapter.
I got a question, Prince Jacob. As you know, there is because here we have just new. You have to put at your list 2 players under 21 years. What do you think the most target names that is it might come to Saudi Arabia?
I think, as you say, the new rules are very interesting because 2 of the 10 have to be under the age of 21, born either in 2003 or afterwards, which creates the possibility not only of signing, but maybe as excitingly loaning as well. And that means that maybe a high caliber of young player could potentially be loaned to Saudi that is not possible to sign, but nonetheless they can develop in Saudi Arabia. And this is where, if the infrastructure improves and the standard improves, top teams may feel like loaning a player to Saudi Arabia is very beneficial. So I'm told the names to watch out for, probably more likely loans than permanent signings, but the names in the quota for 21 and under, some on the list are as follows: Ellie Junior Krupi, who is at Lorient, who is a extremely exciting prospect. And make no mistake, the French market is massive as far as the Saudi project is concerned. They're going to take lots of young French players for sure, 100%.
No, I don't think so, Ben. I don't think so. There is Aussie, Portugal, or Netherlands also. French, they are so shy to go in there, and they need it. Almost 15 or 60% for football from France. They come from Africa. They come from.
Well, that's what I mean, though. That's what I mean. I'm talking about Ligue 1 young players, so they won't all be French by nationality. But what the French league does is, as you rightly say, it taps into the African market. And a lot of players in France, not French nationality necessarily or only, but a lot of players who are playing in France will be targeted. Ligue 1, it's a big base for the deal makers. It's a very important territory. And I also think that we will see Saudi investment.
But they have another idea that can the same thing also Ligue 1 in France, that maybe in Saudi Arabia can make the same thing. So make some school, make some academies in Africa or in South America or something like that.
It's possible. I think the next step in 2025, 2026 will be that somebody in Saudi Arabia will buy or invest in a club in France, and that will give Saudi a base, which will be important also for the World Cup. But I think in the shorter term, you need to keep an eye on a lot of players playing in Ligue 1, young players that need game time, and it's mutually beneficial because the loan fees will be significant, and the French clubs will look to maximize that. I would also keep an eye on Facundo Gonzalez at Sampdoria, who's on loan from Juventus. He's likely to be sent out on loan next season, and I know some Saudi clubs are looking. And Ben Doak at Liverpool is another name that a couple of Saudi clubs really like. And again, that would only be on a loan. Liverpool would not sell him to a Saudi club. But this could be a way of filling the young player quota, not just with acquisitions, but also with loans. And those loans might allow for a very high caliber of promising young talent.
Thank you very much Ben. تفضل أخي عبد العزيز. عفوا
أبو عبد العزيز. طيب أنا أبغى
شكراً.
أسأل سؤال، معلش أستاذ عبد العزيز، دقائق بس. عندي سؤال مستر بن. I have one question about the Saudi women football, and the other part about Al-Qadsiya club, the club, the Aramco company, the owner. Maybe you have small specific details you can tell us about it.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the growth of the Women's League is very important and also very well funded. And I went to the Jeddah derby between Al Ahly and Al Ittihad during the Club World Cup, and there were maybe 3,000 fans there in attendance. I think on the women's side, the most exciting club at the moment anyway is Al Ittihad, because they're managed by Kelly Lindsay, who used to be the coach of Afghanistan and the technical director of a women's team in England called Lewis FC. And she's very innovative. She's a excellent coach, but also mentor. And because Al Ittihad have got, I think, 8 established women's internationals, her main aim is to find players that will improve those Saudi players. So it's a bit different to the men's strategy, where it's a mix of stars and Saudis. Kelly's remit is basically to have as many Saudi national team players playing and as many other players helping to train them and coach them. And they have to accept those star names if they come in. They may get less game time as the Saudi players improve. So it's a dual strategy at Al Ittihad to, of course, win the league, but also improve the quality of the Saudi women's national team. And it's a squad full of really great personalities. One, for example, Hala Khashoggi, she's a footballer and she's a medical student at the same time. And if you look at these players, not just at Al Ittihad, but a lot of them play for Al Ittihad, they've got big social followings as well. 70, 80, 90, 100,000 following them. So a real opportunity to tell their story. And you're going to see the female footballers encouraged to do media, encouraged to tell their stories, and encouraged to basically show a more progressive Saudi Arabia. And I think that that's going to be very useful in the build-up to the Men's World Cup in 2034. With Al Qadsiya, it's going to be interesting because they're likely to get promoted and they're not reliant upon ministry money because they're funded by Aramco. And at the moment, anyway, the only club that Aramco owns in or outside of Saudi Arabia is Al Qadsiya. So should they get promoted, they will have big plans. The feeling is that they will build a new stadium that will be a World Cup stadium, because the one that Al Ittifaq have just opened is not big enough. And I think that Al Qadsiya, even though it is smaller at the moment than Al Ittifaq, could become bigger because they've got a lot of money and a lot of investment and they're not reliant on central funds. So I'm told if they get promoted, big plans are going to happen very quickly. They're going to spend big. They're going to try and get some star names. It can be quite beneficial as well because the players' families, if they so wish, can travel to Bahrain or live in Bahrain. And it's a little bit perhaps more Western to one or two. And I think the last thing to understand is just that at the moment, there's a lot of work that needs to be done behind the scenes. The stadium is basically an athletics track at the moment. The facilities are worse than most of the big clubs in Saudi Arabia. The sports science, the data side of things, they all need to be developed. So Al Qadsiya are going to have to move fast, but they're prepared to spend. And I expect big things from them in the coming seasons.
What is better than that? Pinchak, do you feel any sympathy with Stephen Gerrard as a head coach for the Ittifaq? Do you feel any kind of sympathize with this coach and with the club, with his club?
Well, first of all, Al Ittifaq is a fantastic club. They're great people. And I think that the Jordan Henderson situation somehow had people presuming that the club had let Henderson down. but it's a smaller club. So Henderson also should have been aware what he was in for. And you can't expect Al Ittifaq to be like Al Hilal overnight. So the ambition is very high, and they're incredibly friendly. And now they've made some very strong appointments. Dean Holden, the new assistant manager, is an interesting one. Mark Allen, the sporting director, is highly respected as well. So once we accept that Al Ittifaq are one of the smaller clubs in Saudi Arabia, we have to give them more time as well. Otherwise, it's unfair to presume just because they have Jordan Henderson and it didn't work out that the club have let Henderson down. I think Henderson was guilty of making the move without doing due diligence.
Regarding to this situation, Jacob, regarding to this situation, as Jordan Henderson came back from his journey from Saudi Arabia, they gave him so many questions about living in Saudi Arabia. What about the situation in Saudi Arabia? Do you feel kind of you are not comfortable in Saudi Arabia? Do you feel any problem there? They gave him so many questions about living in Saudi Arabia. What do they
try to
think
make him?
about
They
the
try to make
impairment?
mistake about him.
Yeah, they are trying to just to
push him to say
make him
that
say something bad about Saudi Arabia.
exactly, to push him to say something bad, to something not
To push
correct.
him to say something bad about Saudi Arabia and living in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, I don't think it's just that. I mean, different media have different agendas, of course, but I think it's more down to the fact that Jordan Henderson was Liverpool captain and he's heading into a Euros tournament that will be his last. And when he did an interview, he failed to acknowledge that part of the reason why he moved, not maybe the only reason, but part of the reason was because of the money. And as a result, I think the media feel like he hasn't been entirely honest with why he moved to Saudi Arabia. And he hasn't confronted the fact that in some communities, like the LGBTQ plus community, they felt let down by that move. Now, we have to respect all cultures and we have to respect all countries. So all anybody can do is be honest about why they moved. And then after Henderson leaves, it's natural that he would be questioned on that again. But I don't think it had that much, in my view, to do with Saudi Arabia as a country. I think that it had more to do with Henderson playing in front of smaller crowds, having less training facilities, and struggling to settle in Dammam. And the truth is that when you have 100 foreign footballers moving, some are going to settle, some are not. And if you have 100 signings to the Premier League, 3 or 4 will also not enjoy their time there, but it won't make headlines because it's not a story somehow to the English media that a player might not like the weather in England, a player might not like the food in England, a player might not like the city in England. But when it happens in Saudi Arabia, it makes the back pages. And that's not necessarily fair, but it is just the reality. And I've lived in the Middle East. I've been to Saudi many times. I've been to Bahrain. I've been to Kuwait. I've lived in Qatar. I've lived in the UAE. And I have to tell you that it took me a year to settle because you're dealing with a new language, you're dealing with a new culture, you're dealing with a new lifestyle. And much of it is positive, by the way, but it's still different. Even the climate takes some getting used to. So I think that the players that have left, for whatever reason, some of it's personal, some of it's professional, the players that have left need to understand before they move that changing countries to somewhere like Saudi or the UAE or Qatar, it takes time because they're going from morning training to night training. They're going from 3 o'clock games to 9 o'clock games. They're going from 10 degrees to 25 to 40 degrees. They're going from big staff behind the scenes, sports scientists, psychologists, data analysts, injury prevention coaches, to smaller infrastructures. And I think when you move and the team isn't winning and you only give it 6 months, you're never going to get the full picture. So my advice to footballers, and many footballers now will call me because they know I've lived in the region, and they will ask me, Not should I move? That's not my job to advise them. Obviously, I'm a journalist, but they'll ask me, what's it like out there? And how long should I give it? And how long will it take me to settle? And how easy is it for my wife to get a job? And what's the housing like? How easy is it to get a bank account? What's the traffic like? Is summer really that bad? Does it really rain in the winter? All these questions you get asked. And if you don't stay for a year or more, it's unlikely you're going to settle, in my opinion, because it is a big change. And I think that was more a part of it, in my opinion. So I don't think Henderson gave Saudi Arabia enough time, but I also think he wasn't honest in why he joined. And I think that because he wants to make sure he is picked for England this summer, he felt he had to move in January rather than wait for the entire season, because maybe if he'd have waited for the entire season, he wouldn't have made the England squad.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jacob. Abdulaziz, تفضل.
Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Abu Azzuz, Hazza, Idris, for getting us this chance to have Ben Jacob with us here, and most in a Saudi space, and most probably a pan-Arab platform to just talk to good people here. I have a couple of points for Ben, to be honest. The first one is you spoke about the Saudi project, which goes to 2030. How do you see or value the progress made so far in this interesting project? This is the first point. The second point is, I know, and don't get me wrong, I know you are a close friend of so many players in let's say in the West or in UK. If a player is coming to Saudi Arabia and then he came to you and asked you which of the top Saudi clubs to go to, what advice you're going to give him? Thank you very much.
Well, first of all, let's start with the second question. It's not so much advising on a specific club, it's understanding what the player expects. Do they want to live in Riyadh or Jeddah, or are they prepared to go outside of those two? And in addition to that, what kind of infrastructure are they looking for? For example, Al Ali Stadium and facilities are worse than Al Ittihad, and Al Hilal have got the Kingdom Arena that we saw a game played in, and they are bigger in terms of fan base and stadium size than Al Nassr, although they're both big clubs. But some players will want to play with Ronaldo, some might want to play with Neymar. So there's lots of different considerations, but generally, what I advise is visit Saudi Arabia first, which is why January is difficult, because players don't have time. And I think that a lot of players who are considering Saudi Arabia will now want to go over for 4 or 5 days. Lionel Messi actually made a secret visit to Saudi Arabia before he nearly joined and was impressed by the facilities, but subsequently made up his mind to go to Inter Miami. Cristiano Ronaldo didn't make a visit.
Messi, it wasn't a secret. It wasn't really mediatic and public. All public saw that, Ben.
Well, that was the second trip, though. He actually made a first trip that not many people know about that was entirely secret. The second trip that he made...
when he was in PSG.
Well, the second trip when he was in PSG was the one that he got fined for, but that was an official engagement because he had tourism commitments. But long before that, we're talking maybe 4 months before that, Messi made a secret visit to Riyadh and he looked around the facilities. And then subsequent to that, he sent other people from his delegation to do the same. So he knew exactly the facilities, he knew the city, he knew where he would live. And this is partly why the Saudis were so confident with Messi, because they felt like he'd almost agreed, but obviously he was advanced at the same time with Inter Miami, and there was still the vague possibility of Barcelona as well. But anyway, coming back to your question, it's more about the player. There's not a best club or a worst club. It's a case of the move is big for a foreign player. It's not just a football move, it's a family move as well. So they have to understand, do they want to live in, for example, the newer part of Riyadh, or do they prefer Jeddah, or do they want to go and live in, say, Al Khor and have the sort of coastal scenery and drive to Bahrain? Or could some of them be tempted in the future by a place like Neom when that develops? So they have to understand Saudi. They have to understand that wherever they live is going to change. In 3 years, there's probably going to be new transport, new roads, new golf course, new restaurants. So everything they're joining now reminds me of the UAE 6-7 years ago. And when I look at how the UAE developed, in 3-4 years, everything was new, everything changed. And then if you look at Qatar, from when they got the World Cup to when they hosted the World Cup.
And of course, it will take time to have some change. Of course, it will take time.
Yeah, the infrastructure, you can't build overnight. You can't build a new metro overnight. You can't build a new stadium overnight. You can't build a hotel overnight. So people have to understand that what they're joining now may change, may improve, may develop in a year, 2 years, 3 years. And that comes on to your second question about 2030. So by 2030, Saudi want the average age of the squads to be down. They want the stars to have lower ages. They want to start making money off the league, not just spending money. They want more global rights partners. So it's not just Saudi interest. They want the possibility that because of the league, the Saudi national team is stronger and has better players. And maybe most interestingly, they want it the other way around. They want some Saudis, which is quite interesting at the moment because everything's about Saudi. Vision 2030 is about Saudi. It's about sport in Saudi, entertainment in Saudi, jobs in Saudi. It's about lifestyle and fitness in Saudi. It's about a non-reliance on oil and gas in Saudi and so on. But actually, by 2030, the Saudis are happy if they're ranked the 10th best league in the world, the 20th best league in the world, whatever. They're happy for Saudi-style names to go to Europe. They see that as positive. So you would think if Saudi Arabia developed a, let's just call it Jeddah Mbappe, a Saudi star that was just like Mbappe by 2030, you would think they would want to keep them in Jeddah. But actually, they are prepared to have Saudi stars go to Europe to develop and to shine. So now it's all about importing into Saudi. But by 2030, the strategy will change a bit. And I would also look for Saudi players to be going to Europe and to other parts of the world.
Thank you, Ben. I just forgot to request you to avoid the diplomatic question in terms of the second part. But anyway, as long as you mentioned Qatar, we're just out of a semi-final Asian Cup 2023 semi-final between Jordan and Korea, and as everyone knows, Jordan knocked down Korea and drove their way to the final for the first time. So congratulations for Jordan, and I wish everybody the best. شكرا يا أبو عزوز هزاع إدريس, and thank you very much Ben and everyone. And I'm with you, a very proud listener. Thank you.
Shukran. Thank you very much.
Anytime. أهلا وسهلا, حياك. One question, Mr. Ben. There is a little bird told me about exclusive negotiation. There is a player, if you know the name, please don't say it. There is a young star who plays now in the Premier League. The attention of the people in Al Hilal to sign this player. Do you have any information? And again, don't say the name, please, because we want to work in silence.
Well, I know they're looking at one or two, so that I can confirm.
Secret.
There's not too much that I can say if I can't mention the name, obviously, but it is fair to say that there are two stars that Al Hilal are thinking about in light of this new quota. And also, I'm told that Al Ali are looking at a young star who is under the age of 22, who is currently at a team in the top 6 of the current Premier League. Not necessarily big 6, but within the top 6 of the current Premier League. And I can really say no more without naming names and giving specifics, which it sounds like you don't want me to do. So this is going to be something that develops now. Of course, the window's shut. So we're going to see planning for the summer. But let me also tell you that the Saudi Pro League structure is highly likely to change in the next few months as well. I think we're going to see new executives come in and a restructuring of the Saudi Pro League, because as plans start to develop for the World Cup, certain senior people, well-respected people within Saudi Arabia, will move into a division that will eventually become the local organizing committee for the World Cup. And some of those names at the moment are working in the Pro League. So keep an eye out, not just for signings and star names, but keep an eye out for new executives within the Saudi Pro League in the next few months. And also keep an eye out for privatization, because remember, the Ministry of Finance confirmed that the plan is to privatize not just 4 clubs, but 14 clubs. And my understanding is that when the privatization happens, it will be staggered. So it won't go from 4 to 14 overnight, but it might go from 4 to 6 or 4 to 8. And a lot of the clubs that think they're going to be privatized are waiting to see whether it's going to be now, end of season, or the beginning of next year. But I think Al Ittifaq are waiting to see if they're one of the clubs. I think that Al Shabab will most likely be one of the clubs. And it's very interesting because there's a possibility that after privatization, the Saudis will accept foreign private investors, only minority, not majority. So they won't be able to control the club. They won't be able to fully own the club. That's not what the Saudi Pro League wants. But it is possible that under the privatization plans, a small percentage of Saudi clubs will be offered to foreign investors, which means that between now and 2030, we might see some Saudi clubs part of multi-club models, because it would allow Chelsea's owners or City Football Group or Red Bull Group, it would allow these groups to have a small, and I stress the word small or minority stake in Saudi clubs under the privatization plans. There's nothing advanced at the moment. We're talking 2, 3, 4 phases ahead. So it might not happen until 25, 26, 27, but this is in the thinking as well. So keep an eye out for some modest foreign investment in Saudi football clubs over the next few years.
Jacob, let's make a deal. Giving you back Cristiano Ronaldo, and you give us Erling Haaland. What do you think about that? I think it's a good deal for us to be more successful in our project.
I mean, it's not a deal that I can make, unfortunately, but it wouldn't surprise me in a few years to see Erling Haaland consider Saudi Arabia, but I don't think it will be his next step.
Last question for me. Last question if you allow me, عبد العزيز. بعدين بس آخر سؤال لي. You might heard about Neom Club. I'm really one of their supporters, really, in the 3rd division in Saudi League. Do you know any information about this club and any projects for this club?
I don't, I'm afraid. I mean, I know about new formations of clubs that we're going to see. We know that Neom will have a football club, and we know that eventually the majority of the locations that have a World Cup stadium will have a Saudi Pro League club. So this is interesting because it changes the geography a little bit of the Saudi Pro League. And there's no point in building a big stadium in a new or emerging part of Saudi Arabia if you're not going to leave it with a long-term football club, a men and women's football club. So at the moment, when we look at Saudi Arabia, we naturally, obviously, think more about Jeddah and Riyadh. And of course, Dammam gets mentioned, and 1 or 2 other places as well. But it wouldn't surprise me if in the coming years, the wider geography of Saudi Arabia has stronger clubs all over in the north, the south, the east, and the west. And Neom is going to be one example.
And
of that.
which one attracts you? Which one attracts you? The north or the center, or which one you might go for?
It's not really about
Hilal, of course, Ben.
me.
Hilal, of course.
I mean, Al Hilal gave me a shirt of Neymar, so I like Al Hilal. But Al Ittihad hosted me for the Club
Ben,
World
don't
Cup.
say anything.
You got the right choice. Really,
Ben,
My
don't
club
say
is
anything.
Ettifaq, though. My club is Ettifaq.
Don't say anything about that,
of course,
because all the people here in the space,
because Steven Gerrard, of course.
No, it's not really Steven Gerrard. It's the fact that I know a lot of people at Ettifaq. I know a lot of the club staff. I know a lot of the.
It's not regarding to who knows about the how many players do you know. Just which team do you think is the most that attracts you as long as you watch the Saudi league? Which team do you think is the strongest, the best, and the most exciting for you? Which one?
I mean, it's obvious that Al Hilal are the best team in Saudi Arabia. They're one of the most top teams in all of Asia.
Eventually, you
Hazza,
choose.
no. In my space, he said I like Al Ittihad fans, and he was in his
No,
period
no,
during the
that's
World
not
Cup.
correct.
So
It's regarding to
it's
the
just a
host space,
compliment
I
for
think.
you because you are
it
a
was
fan.
Jacob. I think that you have more or less time. I have just one question, because I heard that in Sky News that Arabia Saudi we have politics about. I don't think if you heard about or not. How about twins between clubs in Premier League and the Pro League Saudi? And how about the idea? Who speaks about make some satellite club about between two leagues?
Yeah, I think I answered this already with the privatization, that over time there will be the ability for foreign investors, in likelihood, to have a minority stake in a Saudi Pro League club, which means that they could become part of a multi-club model. At the moment, that's not possible, but it might be in the next 2 or 3 years. In the meantime, I think we'll see more of an informal twinning or partnership. And this is what I said before about the new quota. The 2 young players don't have to be permanent signings. And if top European clubs feel like the Saudi Pro League standard is improving and their young players are going to get minutes and the coaching is strong, then they may be prepared to send young stars on loan to Saudi Arabia for a season, because they think that that's the right place for those players' development. And they may be able to get a very healthy loan fee as well, which is another consideration. And obviously, at the moment, we kind of have this situation with Newcastle. It's not a direct twinning, but because the PIF clubs are linked to Newcastle in the sense that PIF control Newcastle, PIF control 4 Saudi clubs, there is probably the ability to do some business. But let me tell you one thing about Newcastle and PIF. It's actually going to be easier for another club to come to Saudi and have a partnership, because the problem with Newcastle is that if there is a debate over, let's say, Neves, because there was a lot of rumor about Neves, a lot of fake rumor about Neves. But if Newcastle United want Ruben Neves, hypothetically, I mean, now, if Newcastle want Neves, people were saying PIF own Newcastle, PIF control Al Hilal, Newcastle ask for Neves, Newcastle get Neves. No way. Because if there's a conversation and option 1 is take Neves outside of Saudi Arabia, and option 2 is keep Neves in Saudi Arabia, and the second option means that it's good for Al Hilal, it's good for the Saudi Pro League, it's good for PIF, it's good for the ministry. There's no way, even with Yasser Al Rumayyan as Newcastle's chair, there's no way that Newcastle can negotiate that, because everybody else in PIF, everyone else in Al Hilal, everybody else in the Ministry of Sport, all of the stakeholders, all of the sponsors, they all say no. It's bigger and it's more important for Neves to stay in Saudi Arabia because he represents the league, not just Al Hilal. So it's hard for Newcastle sometimes. It's different if, for example, it's Firmino because he wasn't playing, because maybe the club were willing to loan him out. So circumstances are important. But if the Saudi Pro League and the PIF clubs like a player, then if Newcastle want that player they're never going to win that negotiation. Whereas if a Arsenal or a Manchester United come, maybe they can put down money, or maybe there's less politics. It's probably easier. But yeah, keep an eye out for unofficial or informal partnerships between Saudi clubs, and not just for football, on the commercial side as well. And obviously in the longer term, I think that there is a possibility that we'll see some Saudi clubs end up in a multi-club model.
Thank you very much, Ben. Thank you. It was really amazing, and thank you very much for your answer. Thank you very much for all. That was really great. Thank you very much, أبو عزوز. الشكر. الله يسعدك وهزاك.
شكرا لك. بس ابراهيم والله انه بيمشي، لانه ارسل بالخاص بيمشي مستعجل ابراهيم، وبيجي ان شاء الله بعدين.
Just one question.
طيب على السريع
إبراهيم.
Please, Ben Jacob, I would like to welcome you in our space in here. In the first 1 year ago, when we start our project in Saudi Arabia, we heard a lot of voices raised in Europe that it's similar to China League. Do you believe after 1 year this has been changed, this vision has been changed in Europe? This is my question.
Perhaps. I mean, I never thought it was similar to China, because China had a lot of politics. They allowed stars to come in, and then they made sure that the quota of local Chinese players was increased. So then less foreign stars were allowed, and it wasn't centralized. So eventually the coordination stopped and the money ran out. So anyone that thinks that Saudi was ever going to be like China, I don't think appreciates the strategy. It's easy to say it's going to be like China in the first window, because it was just spend. And there are some similarities there. But the Saudis never said they were just going to spend. And this is the thing that never gets covered. They're not just investing in star names, they're investing in Saudi talent, they're investing in women's football, they're investing in academy football, they're investing in grassroots football, they're investing in commercial stuff, they're investing in technology. So China didn't do all of that. And again, it's really easy to compare them, but China failed because there was no strategy. Saudi will succeed if they stick to their strategy. If they depart from their strategy, they may become like China. But at the moment, there's nobody I speak to in Saudi Arabia that thinks that the league is a finished product at the moment. There's nobody that thinks it's anything other than formative. It's early stages. So as long as they're patient, there's no similarities between Saudi and China. And I think it's easy for people to say they are, but they're just presuming it's because the Saudis have just got a big pot of money and are just throwing it at everything. And there's much more of a strategy to it. Every single hire behind the scenes in the Saudi Pro League seems to me like a smart hire. They've got either experience of the Premier League, experience of European football, experience of the Middle East. For example, look at the chief operating officer of the Saudi Pro League, Carlo Nora. He's an internationally renowned guy, and he's worked before in Asia, and he's worked before in the UAE. So he's not going to be surprised by the region. He knows how the Saudi League works. He knows how Asia works. Before him, we saw Gary Cook, who was chief executive at Manchester City. So these type of hires, Michael Emenalo used to be at Chelsea. These kind of hires, they're not coming in blind. They're not coming in with no experience. They're not coming in with anything other than knowledge. So if you can get those kind of names to take jobs, then they must believe in the project. And the project can't be judged yet. Whereas with China, it was all over too quickly because there was no central strategy, and they didn't make these international hires that help give experience. So personally, I don't think we can be comparing China and Saudi. I don't see many similarities between the two projects.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ben, for your time. And I think you are a big fan of Al Hilal, because I saw you wearing Al Hilal t-shirt before, and you say it before, I think. Let me know if you got any future names about Al Hilal negotiations on private, please. And thank you again for your present, and appreciate this space with you. And thank you for everyone, the co-hosts and everyone, listeners. And please we'll come back again and present in other space, Mr. Ben.
My pleasure. It's always good catching up. Shukran to everybody, and we'll speak soon.
Shukran, Mr. Ben. Thank you.